Russian efforts to influence American politics in the aftermath of the inauguration on January 20th of 2017 did not stop with Election Day in November. They continued throughout the course of those months between Election Day and Inauguration Day in order to do whatever they could to ensure that whatever happened in American politics in 2017, 2018, and beyond was going to be as favorable to them as possible.
Director John Brennan of the CIA, 25 years CIA officer and 4 years as CIA director, stripped this week of his security clearance by the president.
You're listening to TMI for the week of August 20th, 2018.
Sorry, Big Brother, but that's not news.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's just, media is trying to respond to the way things have been changing and the way people have been digesting, news, and I put that in air quotes. People like their sports, apparently, and they don't like dealing with reality. They just want to deal with their, whatever their construct of reality is, and it's being distracted. That's why populism is popular. They just like little, hey friends, how's it going? I'm doing this for you, blah, blah, blah. Little pithy things. Lock her up, people they consume that. They lick it up like, milk from a saucer, like a kitty.
And the locker up is like, sounds like, what's that, World Wrestling Federation?
I guess so.
MMA.
But there you go. That's the same mentality, right?
Yeah, the way those used to see in the 70s, how they would all be wound up in the intros before fights, challenging each other.
Yeah.
Screeching.
Yeah.
Acting in a sensational way.
Yeah, I never got into that stuff. Yep.
Bread and circuses.
Nope. Bread and circuses. Well, and there you go. And it goes back to the Romans, right? Give them wine, give them fresh bread, whatever, They all go into the Colosseum, have a few hundred Christians and slaves, and they're getting ready to be torn apart by the lions and the tigers and the bears. Oh, my.
I hate to get all my world history and perspective from Star Trek, but but there's an episode, right, of the original.
I'm sure there's an episode in there somewhere.
You don't remember it? Where they go to a planet, and I guess a captain of another ship has crash landed on it and brought with him a book on Roman culture, and so the culture becomes sort of Roman.
I vaguely am having flashes in my mind right now, like little Polaroids of that episode. Yes, I know the one you're referring to. Yep.
They have televised games.
See, so it's.
Do you remember that one?
Yeah, no, I do. I do recall that one. Yeah, I'm having like these little Polaroid vignettes flashing in my mind's eye right now.
Actually, there's a few Roman episodes. There's the one where they meet up with a Roman god, and he takes for Scotty's girlfriend. And at one point, the god zaps Scotty.
Okay.
And it's very dramatic. And then there's another one where they go to a planet, and because they've been drinking the water there, they over time develop psychic powers. And
cool.
They control. There's a hierarchy of whoever genealogy lets them absorb more of this element in their water, and they become more powerful. And so there's a hierarchy of command based on who's the most powerful. But there's a little person who is immune to those powers, and it gets pushed around by these. So obviously he befriends Captain Kirk, and together they unseat the dynasty. Then they put up a quarantine warning of other spaceships to avoid the area because of this power that the people can possess. And that's set in Romans. There's 3 Roman episodes in Star Trek. Okay, well, we've lost all of our...
More. Yeah,
Nobody's
you know more than
listening.
I do.
Okay, well...
Yeah, no, it's definitely, you're bringing back memories, but I don't have it in that detail. It's like these little vignettes, kind of sepia tone in my mind now, you know. I think I just read something just a couple of days ago. We're hardwired for violence, so I'm not surprised that with boxing and wrestling and things like football or the fights in hockey or whatever,
the crashes in car racing.
Car racing, yeah, huge, yeah, exactly. You know, or they're always leading things in the news with the latest disaster or terrorist attack or whatever, and you know.
You ever see that TV show Cheaters, I think it's called, where it's a camera crew that follows the jilted lover?
Oh no.
And then they get into a van, the film crew and the jilted lover, and they go meet the person while they're cheating on somebody, and then it's very Jerry Springer. It reminds me of the hockey fights.
That's pretty ghetto.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's been on for a while.
Wow. Okay, yeah, no, never did.
It's the kind of thing
know
that's
it
on
existed.
at 2 in the morning.
You're up at 2 in the morning, just salivating over somebody else's misfortune.
I'm just reporting facts. Don't shoot the messenger.
No, actually, it's in the guise of a anthropological research. There you go. I think I just totally said that wrong. But anyway.
Well.
Yeah, you know, Jerry Springer. Well, you know, hey, it's there for the grace of God go I. Thank God. Was it me or you?
So the latest with Trump is he will not submit himself to the perjury trap. I think that's on Friday.
Okay.
Giuliani and himself somehow have concluded that they simply... Because there's been negotiation for, I don't know, is it 18 months?
Uh-huh.
And they're trying to limit the questions that could be asked, the time, the duration, and that was just a delay show.
Okay.
And today, because everybody all along was saying no lawyer, because in court, if you're a lawyer and your client either has an incredibly weak case or is guilty,
right,
you don't put them on the stand.
Well,
because
if you try to avoid that at all costs, yeah.
Yeah, because either they'll be ripped apart in cross-examination, or that they're so guilty they'll have to lie.
Yeah, exactly.
And as an officer of the court, you can't willingly. So, if you were the lawyer for Trump, you know, you would have been advising him all right from the beginning not to testify. But it is interesting wordsmithing.
Well, I mean, it's like the whole Putin thing when he was in Helsinki. You know, the day after, you know, trying to clean up his mess, and oh well, it was double negative. Next question. So here we go with the double negatives again, or wordsmithing.
Has anyone ever in history corrected something they say to be an incorrect use of English?
Oh my, where do you start?
Because a double negative is the first rule of.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, that Nixon, Lyndon Johnson,
yeah,
Reagan,
but what he's
Bush.
correcting the record to is something that is logically and grammatically incorrect.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why I think a lot of us were snickering listening to that, just going, yeah, okay, man, you can say that all you want, it still is not going to make anything true what's coming out of your mouth right now.
But 33% of it will buy it lock, stock, and barrel.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, there's always going to be the 33% or the 12% or the 20%, you know. I mean, somehow they look at Ontario with the whole sex ed thing. What is it, only like 12%, you know, the Christian conservative rights, totally hijack that. And school starts in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And, the union is saying, hey, go against the government. We'll support you. So, I mean, you have all the conservatives, or this 12% that are salivating on talk radio saying, well, you can't go against the government. It's against the law. You can't do that. This has been legislated. This is, voting, the people voted for this. Well, no, really, only 12% voted for it. And, everybody else liked $1 a beer. And cut the carbon tax, be damned with global warming. We've been hijacked.
I think we have to stop saying 12% and 20%. I think you have to say 33%.
Or 33%. Well, that's the states, though. That's where we're referring to the states.
Well,
I'm referring to
I personally believe that it would be true in any country at any time. I think that 33% doesn't reflect the times or the politics or the era or the culture. It represents the intelligence bell curve.
Okay. Gotcha.
I'll bet 30% of people watch the newspapers for sports.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
33% of radio listeners listen to, Fan 590 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I say 33 is because when you say 12, I think, oh, we've got a hope. There's a fighting chance. When you say 20, it's like, it's always there, it's not going away, but it's some manageable percent. But when you say 33, and you realize that 2/3 of us don't vote, it reminds you that there's something that needs to be fought. That Democrats or intelligent people can't just, hope for the best and not vote.
Yeah, well, I think most people don't vote because politics is partisan, and they make these knee-jerk, they have these pithy little lines that people, like I said, lap up. Everybody else is just, example, cutting social assistance, the welfare and ODSP rates. Stats Canada said it's over 3% or approximately 3%, the cost of living increase. So, but what do the conservatives do? Oh, they cut it in half, the rate increase. So you're just hurting people who are already living on the margins. Talk about cruel. But that's partisan politics. That's the way it works. It doesn't matter whether it's liberal, conservative, or NDP. It's not based on science. It's based on ideology, and that's where you've lost most of the people, and that's why people don't vote, because they don't like that.
I think they don't vote because just before election time, there's a reluctance to put your mandate into a policy platform because it can either be stolen by your opponent or picked on by your opponent. So that over time means that when there's an election looming, we're never voting for somebody with vision that we can all get behind and get excited about. And I think the second reason is this idea that, your vote doesn't mean anything. You're just one in a million. And I think that human beings have a hard time with that.
That's flawed. Again, I'm going to say the goldfish analogy. the memories of a goldfish. We've all been to high school, or most of us, and we've all had to elect student class presidents and all that stuff. And so your vote does count.
But you know what I mean? If you think that most people are voting one way, and whether it's your way or not,
right,
your one little vote is so insignificant in the hundreds of thousands. Like, I'm not debating your point at all. I'm just pointing out that just on a basic level, insect intelligence level, that's sort of part of it. It takes a leap of faith to start believing in these principles that you're espousing.
Yeah, no, I hear you. No, that makes. I've knocked on thousands of doors. So I hear you. I mean, the responses I always got have been varied from one extreme to the next.
Oh, either they care way too much or they don't care at all.
Yeah, total apathy. Yeah. Or they're just angry. And I was I think it was Alliston, and the last election I worked on, and I was chased off somebody's property. The candidate was across the street, and she was just looking at me. She just had this look of this. She was startled. I'm just like, oh.
Huh. So this is somebody who thinks politicians are the problem.
Yeah, exactly. That only happened once. Mm. But I had a lot of doors slammed in my face, but and words spoken that we will not mention on this family show.
But back to this, won't submit to a perjury trap, just to be literally all over the place here. Am I splitting hairs, or is it just obvious to everybody, me, you, listeners? Calling testimony before the FBI a perjury trap is in itself an admission of guilt.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so that's just blatantly obvious.
Yeah.
Needed no explanation.
It's so patently obvious. I giggle. Yeah. A perjury trap. Gee. Okay. Next.
Okay. So, well, again, master of the obvious. Trump's gift to us all has been to reveal a broken system.
Yeah.
Because in every way, right? The impeachment process, rule of law, convention, diplomatic norms,
campaign
past
finance,
agreements, campaign financing, collusion with the enemy.
Yeah. Sourcing material.
Well, I'm interested in the fact, and this has always been the case, that there are these wonderful ethical guidelines, but they're not laws. So even when they brag about how their new ethical guideline handbook is all, unprecedented new guarantees to be a check and balance, none of them are laws. He loves dictators. He's said, "Oh, that's something we should do here," referring to another country without term limits.
Well, and that's it. I mean, but I think even Bush or Obama joked about, or sorry, it was Clinton, joked about that with Chrétien way back when. Yeah. About what you can keep going. Wow, I wish we had that in the States. So if I recall that little piece of history correctly,
Trump's gift has been to reveal, just in the same way a comedian crosses the line, we all throw our hands in the air and react. But now we know where the line is. Trump has done that. Legally, ethically, politically, geopolitically. And almost... Well, okay, so and they canceled the military parade.
Oh, it was like right over $90 million. And Trump was like, "Oh, that's too expensive. The hell with that."
What?
So,
that's a shocker. I wouldn't have thought money was an object.
Well,
it's not his money even.
Well, his base would be up in arms. I think the Veterans of America were saying that money could be used for the vets.
Dude, $90 million isn't even peanuts. It's the crumbs from peanuts.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he just signed that McCain bill that he refused to mention McCain's name. What was it, $730 billion? I think it was like the biggest defense spending bill. Yeah. And but I mean, still, you don't want the Veterans of America going up. You're already trying to keep your base together.
Well, he's saving up for the wall, it sounds like.
The optics are bad, man. I mean,
the wall's going to be $4 or $24 billion, isn't it?
Oh yeah, well, I mean that's.
Isn't it $3 billion just to maintain it, let alone build it?
I think I lost count, man. When it went over $1 billion, my eyes rolled back, and that was it. I was just, yeah.
I thought that the straw that broke the camel's back was that the city of D.C. wanted some kind of payment, and it was
Okay.
it was $12 million or $24 million.
Okay.
Again, bombarded by too much information here.
Yeah.
The listener sure isn't, though. But
Well, I can. Sorry.
But that's, and you're saying 90, which is what I thought I heard. I thought it was going to cost $50 billion, but that was a long time ago, and it was just said in the heat of the moment, the day that this thing was announced. But so I guess time has, but again, yeah, compared to your $700 billion defense budget, we're talking about
optics. It's all about optics. He's so sensitive. We know that now.
Oh yeah, he's sensitive, all right.
So I mean, he doesn't want the Veterans of America. They're like the gun lobby, the NRA. You don't want to.
I don't get this. I'm sorry, you're talking like this makes sense. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no. Well, I'm just speaking as a political staffer, a former political staffer. Optics. It's all about optics. And like I said, the the Veterans of America are like the NRA. You don't want to lose. That's part of his foundation, his platform, or his group support. So you piss them off, and don't forget, November's coming up pretty soon. Those midterms, and the optics would look really bad. Okay. That's my speculation on that.
Well, I'm just saying, comparing $700 billion to $12 million,
to 90,
and you're arguing optics. 90. I mean, to me, I'm imagining the difference. It's like a grain of sand versus a basketball. But
I know, but you could defend. I mean,
okay,
you could spin the $730 billion.
Yeah, every penny of that is worth.
Oh yeah, well, it's the $100 hammer or the $200 hammer.
Don't waste any of it.
Yeah. The gilded toilet seat,
So Papadopoulos is about to be sentenced. And
right. So it was because he made a bad batch of. What's he being in?
Bad batch. Of what?
I don't know.
What's that flake pastry covered in honey?
Oh, baklava.
There you go. Because he made a bad baklava.
The pistachio nuts were not organic. The honey wasn't locally sourced.
I think he's the one that started this whole thing. I thought he was in like Turkey or something, and somebody overheard him boasting about how they just made a deal with the Russians to get a bunch of stuff. He was just drunk in some. And then when they started looking into all of his goings on, he was then charged, has been convicted, but now that's sentencing. And the reason it's in the news on Friday is that Mueller, as head of the prosecution, indirectly, gets an opportunity to recommend sentencing. And they've recommended between 0 and 6 months in jail. And there's a whole list of, failure to disclose, lied about his foreign interactions to the FBI. They all cheated on that form where they disclosed their foreign connections.
Okay.
I used to know the name of the form. I forgot it. It's up to the judge to sentence him.
Well, he lied to the FBI. I mean, at least on that
I thought there'd be more than 6 months, but...
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I guess the prosecution is...
I'm surprised the sentencing is so mild, but maybe first offense, white-collar crime.
Well, is this the same judge that was getting the death threats and he was worried about the jury? Or is that the other trial?
I hadn't heard about death threats, but I think you were referring to the other trial with Manafort.
Oh, yeah. That's the one. Yeah. Sorry, there's so many trials going on right now with Trump.
It's still a bit of a mystery
associates.
what the delay last Friday was.
Oh, I mean, if we'll just jump to that for a sec.
Well, the jury is out. They come back Monday or Tuesday, potentially with a verdict.
Well, apparently, what I heard, and unless you've heard something updated as of last night, the judge in that case now has the U.S. Marshals protecting him. He's now, the media have been hounding him for the jury list, and he's like, no, I'm, as a security thing, I'm worried about their families and for the jurors themselves, and I am not going to be releasing that to the media, nor will the Crown, or not the prosecutor's office, sorry. So that's going to be kept under wraps, and but there's been a death threat or a number of death threats on him. So maybe that might have something to do with it, and that's why they're not saying anything. I don't know. But that lunatic fringe within the Trump camp, there you go. I mean, that's a dangerous base that he has.
Impeachment is going to be part of the midterm campaign. It's been suggested.
Oh, way to divide the base even more. Okay.
If that comes to pass, then the Republicans will be making impeachment part of the campaign to electrify the base, or whether Democrats will be using it as a way to
carrot on the stick to the people who don't go out and vote, and also for the Democrats.
Right. Yeah. So let's just assume that's the case, whatever of those two possibilities. So then after the midterms...
That's a dangerous strategy.
Well, it is, because, again, if you believe, some people believe firmly that the reason why Trump is in power is because the Democrats lacked a plan. It's actually the Democrats who really are as guilty as the Republicans in terms of not doing anything on gun control, on...
Their base was divided. Bernie Sanders had a more left of center base than Hillary Clinton.
And Hillary Clinton, like her or hate her, was essentially business as usual, steady as she goes.
Yeah. And the update to Sanders, I think I read something a couple of days ago. He's running as an independent. He's not going to run as a Democrat. Yeah. So, I mean, if there's division within the left or within the Democratic Party, I mean that's huge.
Well, that would be kind of like true. What Canada has, at least when viewed from a distance. We have the Conservatives, we have the Liberals, and then we have the NDP. And so that pushes the Democrats to the middle, which is, I think, their problem. But okay.
Sure.
Well, anyway.
Good point. Yeah, that's a good point, though. I mean, that's well worth noting.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, it's a way of splitting the liberal-minded vote, which guarantees Trump a win. But what I was getting at with this impeachment thing is, let's just assume that the midterms are about impeachment, whether it's put forward by the Republicans or by the Democrats. When the day after the midterms, I'm trying to imagine. So let's just assume the Democrats, overwhelmingly won the House.
Okay.
As you start looking to the next election, the next presidential election, it will be after 2 years of what will turn into, you hope that he's a lame duck and he's held to task and impeached and all that. But what it's gonna, he's
the shockwaves,
he's a showman.
Man, if that happens, the shockwaves.
Well,
I mean,
I think he'll do
already
quite well, because the incumbency, when he can say, because then when he says, "Oh, the Democrats are stalling on this and that," he'll be for once telling the truth. Like, it'll be him against this Democrat-led Congress. the impeachment will be part of an argument where he's being persecuted. He'll be able to blame the Democrats now more truthfully. And he will become the underdog being attacked by career politicians and the deep state. And I'm just saying there's a way where it may be, and this has been suggested, that there's some Republicans who want the landscape of a Democratic majority in the House setting him up for the next presidential election 2 years later. Like, do you see? If he stays in power,
I see the strategy. Yeah.
And the Republicans stay in control, maybe or maybe not, they'll be able to continue with their agenda. But he hasn't been able to do much of anything from what I've seen, except for raise taxes for poor people.
Well, and just raise everything's gone up. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous.
But the underdog, the last bastion of rule of law and etc., versus him being the underdog, him being able to blame the Democratic-controlled Congress.
Well, that would be the one saving grace, I think.
And this assumes that for whatever reason, I guess impeachment doesn't go forward. Well, you know what? This is the other thing. The day after the midterms, assuming the Democrats win the House, if impeachment is successful, you're sending Pence into the Oval Office.
And he's even more. From what little I know about Pence, he is a very.
He's a nutcase.
He's very Christian. Yeah, he's very right.
He believes that his personal religious views needs to be mandated for all of the population, regardless of their own
religious views. It's better the devil. It's one of those things my dad always said. It's better the devil you know than the devil you don't know.
So what I'm saying is, because I've always believed that Donald Trump picked Pence as an insurance policy. No one will.
That's diabolical.
No one will assassinate President Trump if Mike Pence is in line. Okay, that's an insurance policy.
That's very Game of Thrones of you.
Well, if you believe that Trump has always been a Democrat, why, Anyway,
he's a secret agent of the Democrats, and he's infiltrated the Republican Party.
Largely been a Democrat his whole life. He only became a Republican because this was he saw a way to make it work.
I know a couple of politicians up here who are like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, okay. Because if you believe that Donald Trump is a teetotaling Christian, then you're living on a different planet. Right? So,
well, the Playboy models that he's slept with, please come up to the front desk.
There's been money paid.
Yeah, exactly.
But so then if my insane model of all of this is correct, then if I'm right, here will be the proof. Again, going along the idea that Pence is an insurance policy for Trump. Mm-hmm. What we need to see right now from Pence is a heavy push on anti-abortionism, maybe anti-weed, or just something else to completely freak out the liberals, the Democrats. Because after the midterms, if the Democrats win the majority in the House, there will be impeachment proceedings. And every step that the Democrats go towards impeaching Donald Trump guarantees Pence coming in. So right now, maybe that would seem somewhat palatable. But if Mike Pence went off on some crazy bent about his plans to push through something that is unpalatable to Democrats right now, this would really take a lot of wind out of the push to impeach Trump. Because, again, in my scenario because I'm trying to look after the midterms and before the next presidential election, the perfect scenario would be where Trump is an underdog pursued by the deep state, all the FBI and rule of law is Democrat and against him. All that narrative that might support the incumbency is undone, obviously, if he's impeached.
Yeah.
But if you make him impeaching him an alternative that is worse than anything imaginable for Democrats.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's it. I mean, I think the scenario that you've presented and run through. I mean, it.
Okay.
Yeah. No. I'm just playing it through like a chess game in my brain right now, and it's diabolically. Yeah.
Kofi Annan died overnight.
Yeah. May he rest in peace. Yeah. That sucks. I heard about that this morning. Yeah.
I don't know anything about this Antonio Guterres.
He was the. Yeah.
We don't hear much about him, no?
Yeah,
he's not as in the news as Kofi Annan was?
He is, but I mean, he's up against a fractured world. Like, we discussed this, I think, last week and the week before last on the podcast. The world has gone to the right in so many countries on so many different continents, and a liberal democracy, which the United Nations was set up on, seems to, I don't know, doesn't hold much sway anymore.
Brennan was interviewed last night on Rachel Maddow.
Oh, okay.
And then Lawrence O'Donnell, who wasn't working Friday. There was a guest host on The Last Word.
How did that interview go?
That was Steve Bannon. Was it you who said he was off in Poland advising their government on how to impose? Yeah. So he is, the Darth Vader. Who was George Bush's Darth Vader? I keep forgetting. Karl Rove. Okay. Oh, yeah. So this Steve Bannon is the Karl Rove. He tries to sell himself as the architect and designer.
He's a Sith.
And he helped fuel the Charlottesville. There's two sides to every dispute. And is as knee deep in all of this as anyone. But Brennan, the former CIA director, he was on Maddow last night. So he's one of the people whose security clearances have been revoked. Mm-hmm. He's real ticked off about it.
I read an interview, the Navy SEAL commander who was responsible for bin Laden's capture and killing. Mm-hmm. And he sent a letter or wrote an editorial or something. Sorry, I don't have my facts straight. To Donald Trump, asking him it would be an honor for him to revoke his security clearance because, as far as he was concerned, the former director of the CIA, was a man of integrity.
Yeah. Well, there's a list that came out overnight of a whole bunch of these people who currently hold
ultra secret.
Yeah, and they've all come out in support of Brennan.
Oh, okay. So, see, this is something, the tsunami effect.
Well, I've said this before. You've said this before. Did you ever see a time where the last bastion of hope for progressive politics was the FBI and the CIA?
No. I never thought...
That's not even Orwellian. The last bastion of hope and self-expression and political
the CIA,
freedom.
The NSA, the FBI... What? The U.S. military? What?
If Karl Rove is behind designing that pivot, like that, if that's spin, if you could take it and spin it so that now we're all on, because they're the ones who are reading our emails and all into our shit.
Well, hey, I've always said, I like most countries around the world, but I love them for their cultural diversity and everything, and the same goes for the States. I mean, there's so many things about America that you can't help but love, and having a stable next door neighbor is always a good thing to have, and I hope this straightens out.
Maybe we'll have gunships in Lake Ontario.
Hey man, if it gets too crazy, I had a friend of mine who was sailing from Port Credit down to Quebec City, I think, and he kind of veered just a little south of the 49th in the middle of the lake, and he was met by the U.S. Coast Guard helicopter and boat. So yeah, they're there. They are there. They are watching. You might not see them, but yeah, they're definitely there. Yeah. So, word to the wise.
Like they'll go do some shopping in the U.S.
Yeah, you won't get across.
Hair out of them.
Yeah. It's like you're getting into a little dinghy at Point Feely and just going across to Cleveland for the day to go to the superstore or something like that, rowing your way back. You won't make it, man. You'll be met by an Apache helicopter.
But the wars were for freedom, so viva la freedom.
Yeah.
Freedom,
anyway, that's italicized. Well, I'm rereading one of my favorite books by one of my favorite American authors, John Steinbeck, The Grapes of Wrath. I bought it a few weeks ago, and I wanted to reread it. Why? Because it kind of talks about what's happening in the United States right now, what happened back in the late 1920s, early 1930s with the climate change, or whatever you want to call it, the Dust Bowl, and all the folks in Oklahoma and surrounding states moving out to California to the valley there, and how they were treated by their fellow Americans, and it's I think it's a book that's really should be read again by a lot of people, because the way people are responding to refugees or internal migrants, from going from one part of a country to another part of a country, in search for a stable life and stability and happiness, and et cetera, but are being treated as the enemy of the state. It's really sad. It's really unfortunate. We have our own situation here with Doug Ford and Trudeau and the refugees coming across our border here into Canada. I mean, we've never had anything like this. It's unprecedented, and this is the new reality that they're facing in Europe. But I was talking to a family member about this on Tuesday, and they were saying, well, why shouldn't the Europeans be angry? Why shouldn't the Spanish be angry? There's no more room. And I looked at this person, and I was dumbfounded, and by what I was hearing, and I was like, these are human beings that are running away from strife. They're running for their lives. If they had a choice, they'd stay in their country, and that's where they have their roots. Heaven forbid that we'd have to run for our lives. Hopefully we'd be treated with humanity, with, compassion. So that's why I say The Grapes of Wrath is a book that people need to reread, because, it's a good read.
If one of our CANDU nuclear reactors went tits up, we would be doing just that.
Exactly.
Trying to migrate to other provinces,
mm-hmm.
maybe even other states.
Mm-hmm.
We'd all be in our rafts.
Mm-hmm.
We would outnumber the helicopters and patrol boats.
Yep.
Is it nuclear?
Nuclear.
Or help me say it. How do you say it?
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Nuclear. Nuclear. Yeah, we were talking about infrastructure and environmental issues, and that. The 5 nuclear plants that they were shutting down in Europe.
Well, your story has changed. Now it's not just France; it's several countries.
Oh, which ones?
Finland.
Oh.
Germany.
Okay.
Ontario.
No way. Which one?
Pickering.
Oh no. How many at Pickering did they close?
I think they've closed in twice, but
all reactors.
I think 4 of 6 were closed at Pickering earlier last month due to algae clogging up the intake for the water coolant system.
Because the water in Lake Ontario had gotten so warm, I guess?
Yeah.
Wow, okay. So where else? That's
well,
is that a first, by the way, for Ontario? For the
no, that happens every now and then.
Oh, okay.
And you know, who knows? I mean, there's been some heavy rains. Was the algae plume the result of heavy rains, of increased water temperatures, of our global change, of our unusually warm heating degree days in a row? You know. Bottom line is, nuclear power plants aren't these things you can depend on 100% when it gets warm.
Especially with climate change being the way it is now. I mean, so many records have been set all over the world with regards to...
Well, the heavy rains are in itself an example of climate change.
The 401 got flooded yesterday out by Napanee because of the heavy rain downpour. There was the Environment Canada heavy rainfall warning, and at one point I heard on the local news here where they do the streets, the traffic, and they were warning that the eastbound 401 in Napanee had been closed because of overland flooding onto the 401.
Well, just last night there was the same thing again as a week ago.
Oh, no.
Certain parts of, like I think Union Station had a foot of water inside it. That whole area around sort of the X, I think Reese and Lakeshore. Anyway, flooding. And it's, and I guess we'll all blame our new mayor for that.
No, that's infrastructure. I mean, that's not John Tory. I mean,
well, I'm just kidding, but
yeah. Oh, okay.
That's what.
Be careful, the radicals these days, man. They'll be out with their pitchforks. Look out.
So but obviously it's a municipal thing, and it reminds me of nuclear because it's like designed for failure. They do know that once every X number of years this is going to happen. It's been happening for a long time. And do they spend the billions of dollars, probably many billions of dollars, that would be required to prevent this kind of thing from happening? Or do you once every 3 years or whatever have an event like this?
Well, okay, and this is a perfect segue.
Well, hang on. I don't want to segue. Okay. Hang on, because I wanted to finish the nuclear thing. So, this is all climate change.
Well,
and, we're talking about nuclear power plants and these ones in Europe that had to close down.
Right.
And to understand, a typical U.S. power plant uses 30 million gallons of water an hour. 30 million gallons of water an hour.
One nuclear reactor.
A typical U.S. nuclear power plant uses 30 million gallons of water an hour.
So just to clarify for everybody who don't know what a typical nuclear power plant is, how many reactors in a typical nuclear power plant in the United States?
One.
Oh, just one. Oh, okay. 30 million.
It takes the same amount of water required by a city of 5 million to fuel a typical U.S. nuclear power plant for 1 hour.
Wow.
30 million gallons. That's from a separate source.
So I see a whole whack of additional problems.
Well, that's misleading.
Because of that.
Hang on, that's misleading. It's not like a nuclear power plant evaporates.
Yeah.
30 million, disintegrates or consumes it, or it's that 30 million gallons of water an hour are required to flow through it.
Yeah.
Because a nuclear power plant is so inefficient it's only really harnessing 33% of the heat it creates. So 60% of the product of a nuclear power plant is unusable waste heat. So that's why you need 30 million gallons.
Well, and herein lies the rub. I mean, the Hoover Dam, was it last year nearly closed because for the first time since it was built back in the 30s because of there's just no more water. I mean, all the water's evaporating off the Colorado River. I mean, there's no rain, and between being used for hydroelectric power, I mean, it's being used by Las Vegas or whatever. And then it's being used by agriculture further down the line, and they just don't. The hydroelectric plants,
Another issue is some of these nuclear plants are on the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them are on Great Lakes.
Yeah.
There's a few of them that are fed by, rivers.
Thank God, something.
No, yeah, that's one thing that makes sense.
There you go.
No, they've got to be next to the ultimate heat sink, which is a lake, a river.
Okay.
French utility EDF shut 4 of its reactors at 3 power plants on Saturday.
Holy moly.
Swedish utility Vattenfall shut 1 of its 2 reactors.
Mm-hmm.
And nuclear power plants in Finland, Germany, and Switzerland have cut back the amount of power they produce. The 2 reactors being built at Vogel are in the news now. The price tag for those 2 reactors are $27 billion, which is the expansion of an existing nuclear complex. So you can see how expensive they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then people who promote them would claim how they're 100% reliable, never fail, But if it gets a little warm, all hell breaks loose.
Well, yeah, exactly. And we haven't had an EMT yet, so from the sun or from a nuclear attack. So.
Or the Russians hacking into a nuclear power plant.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And meanwhile, Trump hasn't appointed a cybersecurity chief, but whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in nuclear headlines, there's a study... there's a recent study showing that fission products have been detected and are a growing concern in Hawaii, and they're detecting it by sampling the soil. And this is Fukushima related. And apparently the report also has charts showing an increase in cancer that corresponds with the timing of these findings. Here in Ontario, Home Pain, Ontario, is protesting the idea of storing spent fuel.
Oh, just off of Lake Huron.
Well, no, that's not spent fuel. That's nuclear waste.
Oh, okay.
We wanted to bury nuclear waste 1 kilometer away from the shoreline of Lake Huron at Bruce. But we've never talked about, in fact, the Porter Report in 1978, one of its conclusions was that no new nuclear plants would be licensed until a solution for nuclear waste was found. So people on both sides of the anti-nuclear issue have been awaiting a plan for spent fuel. An old tally was 57,000 tons of spent fuel are accumulating as a result of the pursuit of nuclear, particularly and only in Ontario, largely.
Okay.
So the entire country is responsible for nuclear waste, but it only was generated in Ontario. But who cares? Whatever. I think it's a federal liability, actually. Yeah. So the federal government subsidizing Ontario electricity. Anyway, Home Pain. So that's a community that's smart enough to have arranged a protest against. They want to store their bundles of spent fuel.
Yeah, that's just, I have a lot of concerns about that. Groundwater, fault zones.
how long our economy will survive, who will maintain and monitor these stored fuels, will they be speaking English 300 years from now, on and on. Okay, monkeys studied near Fukushima have smaller heads. And you can just go ahead and Google us, smaller heads at Fukushima, monkeys, Google it. Don't believe me. Okay.
Get acid, man.
Yeah, and just to edit that out, just I'm talking about serious shit and you're joking around with designing drugs, whatever. Durham. So just to put it on the map here, Durham. 4 reactors at the Pickering nuclear station were forced offline in July when algae blooms blocked cooling water intakes.
That's
incredible. Because of the solar thing, it's like, right? It's all about peak generation, and you're going to need more air conditioning when it's hot and sunny out, and solar's the answer. But if it gets too warm, you got to shut down the nuclear plant. So, to punctuate the headlines of nuclear news this week, article in Scientific American, far more jobs created by renewables than nuclear. Just saying.
Find us on Twitter at @thatarcher, our podcast page, tmi.twxnet.com. Rate the show on iTunes. It changes the way the show is listed.
And for your information,
U.S. locking Canada out of trade talks. Trump hints. President suggests Mexico-only meetings are not an accident. Timmy's fixes its marketing and its lids. Trump belittles a critic as a dog. Battle on trade unsettles China and its leader. Turkey scrambles as prices soar as lira plunges. Oh, this is illuminating. 11 months in the dark, then click, brightness. Ponce, Puerto Rico. They finally got their power back, if only temporary.
Is that just a particular house, or is that the last house without power?
No, that's a particular part up in the mountains near the rainforest that didn't have power. Tesla's board warns Musk.
He's been complaining about sleeping on the floor on the assembly line for a long time. And he was being kind of complaining this week in some news stories I read.
Sounds like sleep deprivation, eh?
Well, I guess it's... But he's, you don't expect them to cry out for help that way. And, he's got his, hands in a lot of pots right now.
Yeah.
Going to space and all.
Yeah. Well, it's, that type A personality.
Okay, but overachievers aren't usually all complainy.
This is 2018. A lot of snowflakes.
Okay.
Including myself.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, man, fighting Trump's rhetoric. More than 200 newspapers publish editorial taking on attacks against the press. I think that's worth noting because, when has the media had to stand up against the President of the United States? Enemy of the people.
I always loved when that reporter threw a shoe at Bush.
Oh, God. Was that when he was visiting Iraq or something like that? Yeah. Trump did have his little thing against Canada again this week. He did say, we're not negotiating with Canada right now. Their tariffs are too high. Their barriers are too strong. So we're not even talking to them right now.
Well, there you go.
We'll see how that works out. This is only going to work out in our favor.
Well, we're building lots of buildings. I'm sure we can use our own steel.
Oh, God, yeah. We make the best steel in the world down in Hamilton, and other parts of Canada. But unfortunately, I don't think any of them are Canadian companies anymore because of the way things have worked out.
Yeah,
but
that's a weird thing. Okay, how does that work? Like, for example, the big Stelco plant in
Hamilton.
or what's it called? Didn't it get bought by U.S. Steel, and then it's sort of been shuttered? And then you're saying that what is the penetration of U.S. corporate ownership into the steel industry in Canada?
Alcatel.
And then when you put up tariffs and trade deals, aren't you just blocking your own corporations from exporting their product to your own country?
That's a good point. I hadn't even considered that one.
Thanks for coming.
That's true. Yeah, that's it's true. It's true.
Just saying.
It's true. It's you're biting off your hand to spite your face, or biting off your nose, whatever that saying is. So, yeah.
And then we're supposed to feel all jealous because wasn't one of your earlier headlines that Trump is talking to Mexico. Only?
Yep.
So we're all supposed to be like, all up against the wall at the prom party wondering why Danny's not dancing with us.
Well, and that's it, it's just, what the heck?
Find us on Twitter @thatarcher. Send us an email, archer@twxnet.com. For guest links and contact info, visit our podcast page, tmi.twxnet.com. Find us on Android and Apple podcast apps. Subscribe and rate the show on iTunes.
I'm Dave Archer in Toronto.
And I'm Ian Stolberg in Ottawa.